Ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased to have an interview with Andrzej Sapkowski in his mother town. Once you said that fantasy is telling a myth, a tale, a legend using a language that is not related to fairy tales. Once The Witcher was published in Nova Fantastica in 1996, the genre was neither popular nor well known in Poland. It is now popular in pop culture, and The Witcher has its contribution to the status quo. This is the most distinguished protagonist created by Polish culture. What do you think we owe fantasy owes such popularity? Well, it's not so true, actually. Even in Poland, when I could consider myself a pioneer in this genre, in this field, but I was absolutely not among the top 10 authors writing in this genre. But when we talk about fantasy, it was not treated very well as something that is not really that a good author does not deserve. However, once we got over it, I'm still here when Corypheus are. Well, no matter what literary genre you consider, not to mention memoirs, although they do consider them some components of fantasy, but I suppose there is no difference between Emma Bovary and Bilbo Baggins from the fantasy point of view. When it comes to memoirs, I suppose it also contains some fantasy. My own diaries or memoirs included, though I haven't written them yet. But we are going to come back to the beginnings of the genre, which you described, complaining about a lack of knowledge related to the principles of the genre. Where do you think its origins lie when it comes to this genre? Who would you name the fathers and mothers? Yes, we must not forget females. Homer was the first one. Yeah, there are some components of fantasy in his writing, but let's stick to classical literature. As for the fathers, because we'll mention mothers later, we should mention Tolkien, No Discovery, and Howard, who is the father of the famous Conan. This is where the genre of sword and sorcery started. Tolkien, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, these are the terms that everybody is familiar with. And then it developed. Both Tolkien and Howard are related to the 1930s. Whereas the science fiction and fantasy flourished in the 1960s and 70s. This is where the new wave in fantasy developed. Some females made their debuts. There were various misogyns who prevented females from entering these areas, but typically, when you try to prevent females from doing something, people typically fail in this battle. Well, you need to control me, because when I start talking, I could talk for hours. I would like you to mention other names. Fritz Leiber with Multi-Worlds and Nordic Matter. But if we do have some people who are only commencing their adventure with fantasy, what novels would you enumerate for the good beginning? Fritz Leiber deserves his position among the top 10 because sword and sorcery is a name of the genre invented by Leiber. He had great accomplishments in the genre. He wrote about the adventures of the Grey Cat, and it follows the principles of fantasy. I would like to mention corypheus of the genre, such as Jack Vance, and the representative of the new wave, Rogers Rasnin. And we also need to remember females. The best the example of turning the King Arthur myth into great oeuvre. There are still those who still follow the rules of the genre, and we need to remember Stephen King. Who only quite recently wrote an amazing story, an amazing book, which will soon, it's called Fairy Tale, and it will soon be turned into a movie. And when it Patricia McKillip, whom we owe to your series, the series of fantasy literature recommended by Andrzej Sapkowski. That's my suggestion. If you want to read the books recommended by Sapkowski or through his lenses, that's such an opportunity. I learned the oeuvre of Patricia McKillip quite early, and I managed to persuade MUG, a publishing house, after many attempts, that it's worth reaching for classical literature. Patricia belonged to the group of classical writers. She was born in the same year, 1948. Le Guin shouldn't be forgotten. I don't know if it's Alzheimer's disease that I suffer from or something worse, but when it comes to Ursula Le Guin, she is a great theorist of the genre. We need to mention an anecdote. The first volume of her famous title I bought in Amsterdam. I visited this place during my business trip, and I calculated that $10 for a book, if I had only $15 to survive a day, it's too much. But then I decided to buy one only, and the next day decided to buy another one. The same happened to the Amber series, which is still uncompleted because the author died. We decided that fantasy is a myth retold. Where does the idea come from that the retold myth is the Arthurian myth? You mentioned it several times. Well, it's my proprietary statement, and many people challenge it. Whenever I turn to a new fantasy book, it's always, it's about a king and someone who tries to deprive him of his throne. It's like Arthurian legend. All right, there is a simple guy in a village who then finds the Holy Grail. And again, we're coming back to the famous legend. 98% of fantasy books are somehow based on Arthurian myth. Most probably because the Anglo-Saxons who dominate in fantasy literature, there is no point challenging this statement. In addition to Arthurian myth, they know not much. The Anglo-Saxons are strange in this matter, but well, that's the way it is.
Let's continue. Everything I have said so far is not true. So I say now but, and as we all know, if somebody says but, everything that has been said before should be rejected. But fantasy cannot be just perceived as the Arthurian myth that is slightly amended. All the books of this kind of genre have something that actually are contradiction to the previous statement. It's just like with cats. There are no two identical cats, no two identical books. So we cannot invent a theory that we have to fit a specific style. It's not logical. It's not possible. It's the same with the Arthurian matter, because there is no one specific text. It's retold many times. Irony is used contrary to the previous stories. And if you expand it, you will include the motive of the Trojan War. So it's like the story that covers all Middle Ages and reaches the modern times. But I do remember when in the 1990s you published the text about Pirog. So you were joking about Slavic heroes. So walking from town to town, walking through the forest, fields, through meadows, the peas overgrown with horseradish, through holy forest. So you were just showing the fragmentary nature of the Slavic mythology and the archetype that has pressed its trace on the modernity of the contemporary Polish. Mieszko, Dąbrówka, the front gate to the Europe. And life is very ironical, because 20 years ago the great Lechia was developed, and Slavic legends became quite popular, and some identity had to be awarded. So actually fantasy based on history can be better than fantasy based on literature. So how about this Slavic mythology? Aren't you tempted? Probably not, because the great Lechia should be written based on Mason's and other nations. So it's a great material, it's a great reservoir, it's a great platform we could use. However, serious people are laughing at these aspects and will keep laughing. Let's get back to the famous pirog. I would like to clarify that I have never been an antagonist of the Slavic mythology. I do not think that it's any worse than any other mythology. Mythology is mythology. Each mythology has its advantages and disadvantages. So, a talented writer knows how to use any mythologies. But Pyrrhic was a kind of fighting text, a militant text. What I meant at the time, people who were doing different professions, like, for example, they were breeding sheep, they were dealing with some masonry, or they were doing nothing, all of a sudden they decided to become writers. But since they have already observed that Conan has been already invented, that the ring has been thrown into volcano and it cannot be repeated, so they decided that they had to invent something different and they should use the Slavic mythology, the horseradish and other herbs, the great lekia. At the time, not many people knew that term. So ultimately, the talent was not that great. Writing skills, well, these are two different things. They didn't even have the great writing skills. They were also unable to write inspiring, involving stories. So they were writing about cotton wax, eaters. They were like Slavic monks. Żelesz was like a goddess. Other writers were saying that the Slavic gods also included the god. They used English translation. A boiler. Cauldron. So more and more of such texts were written, and these people had no idea about fantasy. They didn't know what this genre was and what it wasn't, but they decided to write about this pseudo mythology. And I started being a bit irritated by this. I was very young at the time. I was about 45 years old. So I was a youngster then, and when you are young, you can do a lot. So I wrote a militant text against such people, about these writers who had no idea what fantasy was, but decided to write about it. They are writing this and they are criticizing that. They pretend that they are critics. So it was quite common. This text is not very popular. So this great Lekia, where does it end? In Ural? Alexander the Great probably he supported Amudarya. It was the great Lekia. Amudarya. If we are talking about Alexander the Great, we have to talk about Amudarya, the Pyrenees. So if we exclude this militant element from the story of Pirog, there is no fighting against Slavic characters. People were telling me that I'm such a cosmopolitan, that I I do not see how much good, how much interesting aspects are in the Slavic mythology. So we had some gossiping about the colleagues. So let's get back to the fantasy. What about the historical aspect of fantasy? The sources are in the Middle Aged romances, knighthood stories. What's the historical nature of fantasy? Let's talk about only your books. We are not going to do any other analysis. Is it about requisites, about props? I think it's more than that. The historical fantasy or the fantastic history, you can use these two terms alternately. This is one of the genre of the genre. So it really has deserved this position among about 9. Some scientists claim there are fewer. So there is such a sub-genre which is referred to as the historical fantasy or the fantastic history. So this topic is very broad, just like with the Lekia. So it's just like talking about the contents of sugar in sugar. So sometimes there is more history in less fantasy and vice versa. Sometimes these proportions are completely different. Sometimes there is no history at all and a lot of fantasy and vice versa. But all the time it's the same genre, which has every right to be classified as the genre. There are lots of examples. The list is very long, so let's focus on the best aspects of this genre. Okay, I would like to ask you a question quite close to the issue, what is the best in this genre? So I would like to start with a quotation. We are not going to the war, but we're going to give you brotherly help. We are crossing the border to provide help to some people from Upper Edirne. Even in trilogy, we hear information on special operations. So are we creating a historical patchwork? But we cannot escape the history. History is always present. The sense maybe is not in all the details. The sense is in this light motive. And this is the motive. Whatever happens in the story, and it doesn't matter whether it depends on dragons or elves or whether somebody loses the ring, bad people will always be present. It is always quite visible during armed conflicts. During one of the meetings in Moscow, somebody asked me about this fragment, the first fragment about the brotherly help. And somebody from the audience received a round of applause. Actually, somebody wanted to hang me. So ask me, what did I mean? Which historical event provided me with the inspiration to write that the kingdom in the state of war with the other kingdom is shot in its back, and it is referred to as the brotherly help. So I said that it was the attack of the Polish army in the east. So I avoided the lynch. And we all know that from the time when this text was published, some other brotherly helps were provided. There are lots, and there will be more of such brotherly helps. I'm a retired officer, so I'm good at wars. Your characters want to escape from the history. Each one of them takes an attempt, starting with the Witcher, who declares, I'm not interested in politics, in succession to throne or revolutions. I came here to do some work. You've never heard of some honesty, professional ethics. This is a declaration by Geralt. As Wojtek Orliński noticed when other stories were published, stories of the Witcher were published, we were all Witchers. It was in the 1980s, in the 1990s, when Geralt was with us, was close. So when you were writing the Sword of Destiny, have you ever believed in the end of history? Absolutely not. You cannot believe in this. You cannot. It's difficult when the history becomes uncontrollable. But what can we do? The history will always be present. Let's not get away from the topic of the fantasy literature, because we are going to talk about fantasy. The historical fantasy or the fantastic history is quite close to historicism. The author has the right to use it. Otherwise, it will be just the historical novels, stories. And then we will be verifying to what extent young people do not like the classical Polish historical literature, because it's filled with didactics. It makes it very hard to read. But how can you speak Polish if you do not use a trilogy? O Kosak-Sztucka, o Parnicki. How can you speak Polish if you do not read these authors? But you have read Sienkiewicz's novels. Even the witch who speaks Shakespeare's language in Silesia. And there is one layer that is a very Polish layer. And this is this wonderful language which combines modernity with some Latin influences. And Sienkiewicz is very present there.
Ja się wychowałem na tego typu.
I was brought up reading such books, and I'm not going to be ashamed of it, or, well, not to mention be proud of it or praise it. There were various books available at my home, and I was encouraged to read. Nobody told me you will spoil your vision or think you're going to become, or preferably build bridges, because engineers will always have a good job. You know, those who study Polish or languages or literature won't find a good job. You will simply become an artist who dies of hunger, Hungertürster. Honestly speaking, I was enamored in historical literature, but if you keep on reading, you catch the language. An interesting fact with Marcin Wolski, with whom we didn't have much in common, but we loved quoting trilogy and asking historical riddles. Or some games based on trilogy. In the Architects Club in Warsaw, we were standing there and asking a riddle. Who were the two soldiers killed by Bogusław? Biłowóz and Zawratyński. Yes, indeed. Now my turn. What about Wołodyjowski? What was his crest? Could you please stop talking about Mickiewicz? Suddenly a waitress came and said so. Well, Mickiewicz in the thesaurus, in the rucksack you carry on your back, and even persisted to... I denied some facts, but, well, what people can see, meaning I'm an erudite, is undeniable. However, this is not only about a beautiful language, it's about myth-creating prose. It's the Republic of Poland from the edges of our country. Well, not so much, but yes, indeed, it is. No point challenging writers. My father, who was an erudite as well, kept on saying that you shouldn't look down on the author's efforts. Well, indeed, but we always perceive the eastern parts of Poland through the eyes of Sienkiewicz. It's doable, probably. We know why trilogy was filmed from the end. It was not possible to film it from the very beginning. Perhaps the world will change, but we don't know. Sienkiewicz and the myth-creating potential corresponds to what you persist in doing in all your written texts. You show various types of narratives, events, descriptions, the truth, if it does exist, and something that is written later on. And I have another quotation. Among serious scientific opinions, there is a brave theory of an eccentric master of arts who, unless silenced, claimed that in Rivia there were no plots, but simply common features of local thought, boorishness, xenophobia, and ignorance. Do you believe in historical truth, as we're going to talk about history and freedom? Do you believe only in contradicting versions, contextualism, and simply, is there any historical truth, or there is not? There is another quotation. It might be mine by chance. It says that history is a relationship, typically one containing lies, composed of events that didn't take place and told by historians who are mostly false. That's the way it is, and nobody is going to change it. Having looked, that's what I need to say. We've got two participles in Polish. There is also a famous quotation, but I don't know who said it. The majority of events which are insignificant and told by historians who are mostly false. Depending on the time point along the curve, the veracity of events means has its meaning. Whether someone is a fool or not, it will turn out later. But perhaps the quotation is not mine, because I would say that these fools are paid by fools and son of the bitch who are even greater than them. We've got some examples related to Hussite's trilogy. I started reading Długosz, and there were many aspects which I couldn't understand until I learned that he was paid for his chronicle, and he was writing in such a way that his supervisors liked it. that his patrons liked it. Those who paid to the historians could be decent people who cared about the truth, but it's hard to believe. Absolutely. That's the way it is. A long answer which can be brought to simple no. And since there is no historical truth, can we hope for another story deeply rooted in a historical period, just like the Hussites trilogy that took us back to the beginnings of the 15th century in Silesia, and you didn't think much about church dignitaries. The same was the case of Długosz. There are no texts without the narrator. So could we hope for a historical and fantasy text with Andrzej Sapkowski as the narrator? Definitely not tomorrow, because now I'm going to have a break. Typically, it takes a year after completing a book. I don't like writing a log, as it's harmful to one's health. Well, if I live long enough, I'm now 77, but my family is characterized by longevity, you know. An infarction can happen to anybody. Assuming, and this is a very strong reservation, that if I don't feel like doing it, or if I'm discouraged, I'm not going to write it. But according to my current plans, I would like to continue the story from the Hussites' War. Talking about Hussites' War, we need to remember it was like the turning point when the first religious war started. There was a bloodbath and slaughter. There was Luta, Minta, religious wars, and then we come to religious wars in general. I am going to write about 30 years war, another slaughter that changed the image of Europe we used to know. And it's very good that we won't encounter such a event again. Quite recently, my hairdresser asked me, Andrzej, do you think we're going to have the war or not? Well, it's not the 19th century when the squadron of dragons are going to enter war in Europe. What are you talking about? And it turned out I behaved like a fool, because now it turns out we do have a full-scale war, but we shouldn't be talking about sad things. Yes, and the good point is that we will welcome questions from the audience. We do hope to have some. Don't feel obliged, but if someone would like to ask a question, please do. We can't see you, unfortunately, which encourages being brave. And Andrzej will not know who asks the question. No, no, I'm not going to attack you. Oh no, we have been enlightened, and we can see a volunteer. All right, now you can hear me. Good afternoon. I'm Magdalena Szyborska. I work in a library, and I do recommend your books. Recently, I've been reading Hussite's trilogy and I am delighted. I represent the generation brought up reading The Witcher over and over again. I was 15 years old then, and the books were not intended for my age, but I need to say I am delighted. But my question is, the way you present history, is it characteristic for you? Is it original and proprietary? Or are you inspired by other authors? Rarely. To say never would be a lie, but rarely am I inspired by authors. You're not going to escape your character, your temperament, your opinions and beliefs. It is all embedded there. The old rule, and another quotation from Stephen King, is that only bad books tell what their authors are like, but good books tell what their characters are like. However, you cannot escape the fact that that's this kind of creation. You have two erotic scenes in the Hussite's trilogy. Contemporary authors are not so present in your text, contrary to pop culture quotations. But if we have quotations from the majority of old works in an erotic scene, we need to say this is a kind of literature canon, and there are plenty of authors from Ovidius, the Bible, romances, and so on and so forth. However, these are not contemporary references.
Ukrywałem.
It was no secret. It's not secret. There's an open text about it. There are different rumors, gossips. What did I steal of someone? And I'm not going to clarify. Any more questions? Hello, Andrzej. I have the following question. I'm a bit stressed. You've mentioned that you read a lot. So I wonder whether very often you get back to your own books. Or is it the fact that maybe if you have written something, you do not want to read it again? So, and I would like to refer to The Witcher, whether you would like to read The Witcher again, whether you are using your notes. And could we at least learn the title of your new books? Because last year you said that you were afraid that somebody would steal the idea, the title. But once the book is over, they will not have time to steal. Oh, nowadays it goes very quickly. I will start from the end. Now it's still a secret. I don't want to have it secret, but this is the publisher's wish. So what I can tell you, it's the date of the book's premiere. It will be the early December. As far as I know, the book should reach the bookshelves, but that's the only piece of information I can share, because my publisher has this request. It's the only impact he has on me, the only influence, but he or she is influential. What was the other question? Sometimes I have to verify translation. There were quite a lot of translations, and some translations are not very good, especially with Mandarin language. I have some problems. Sometimes I have to read the translation. Sometimes I'm laughing quite loud when I see the mistakes made by the translator. Sometimes I must agree that it was me who has made the mistake, not the translator. But I think your question was whether sometimes in the evenings I read and I become delighted with my writing. No, I don't do this because I became delighted with it quite a while ago. I would like to ask an additional question. It's a question of one of the readers. Do you happen to see these beautiful publications of the characters, beautiful publications that are made based on your books? Recently, yes, it was the French who published these companions. So they are very good at this. So they published an atlas of The Witcher, very beautiful publication. So I'm not a visualist, but I really like these publications, and I really like them. I like the maps. I have this genetic fault. I only see the letters. I do not see the pictures. This is definitely a genetic fault, and it cannot be changed. So if somebody makes a drawing, somebody designs a nice book cover or nice map, I become quite delighted. Sometimes I'm quite delighted with someone's work because I do not see the pictures myself, my pictures. I just see the letters. Another question. Hello, Vincent Berg. I write scripts. I want to become a director. I think that your books are one of the best. They are also very consistent. So I studied your books, especially The Witcher Saga, and I think that the relations among your characters, these relations you develop, are very consistent. They are one of the best in the pop culture history, especially the relation with Geralt and Ciri and Jennifer. So I've got a question whether you are following a principle, or maybe there's an advice how to develop such relations. There's a special school. It's also the typical writing technicalities. And I cannot pretend that you also need inspiration, that there are muses that help us. So it's a conglomerate. I cannot define it myself. If I say that I know how to do it, maybe people would be requesting me to write how it should be done. It's not possible. You just need talent. You cannot be a good writer without the talent. Have I answered your question? Great. The floor is yours, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to say that there is no prescription how to be a good writer. You need the talent, the writer's talent. Thank you for your answer. Have a great day, and thank you for your books. Any more questions? If not, we'll keep asking questions. I think there is someone. Hello, my name is Zofia Radek, and for the past 3 years, I am writing a fantasy book, and I'm fascinated with this genre. It's my favorite one. I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion on the future of this genre? I think that currently young people do not read that much fantasy. And if one of the books of fantasy genre becomes popular, it is really a part of the mass culture. And I think that the latest fantasy books are focused on romances, and there is not enough substance matter of this literature. There is no development of this word. The Lord of the Rings, The Witcher. There are no books like these now. And if they are written, young people do not read such books. So what is your opinion on this? I disagree, completely disagree. Science fiction and fantasy convents, not only in the United States, but also in Europe, are attended by 10,000 people, thousands of people. The latest convent in Glasgow, Chengdu convent, a lot of people arrived to these events. They were not forced to go there. They are fans, lovers of this literature. So if we look at other genres, thriller, crime, detective stories, romance, love stories, fantasy is attracting so many fans, lovers. So they are coming to such events. They are discussing this literature for 3, 5 days. They are exchanging books. They are sharing their ideas. They are taking part in discussions or panels. I've never heard that lovers of detective stories have such convents. There is one convent, it's called the Black Week, it's in Spain, but it's the only event. So the popular literature is like that. Now I'm going to cite Tillmont. I know who is taking part in the events in Siekierki. I know very well what is happening in the fantasy literature. I read quite a lot of such books, 50 per year, sometimes more, sometimes fewer. So I know how many talents work right in this literature. And there are also those who keep writing, and as a matter of fact, they should stop writing fantasy. But every year, at least 4 to 5 names of debutees are appearing. And then we get new books of the writers who didn't write so many books, like Martin. All of a sudden, they publish a great book. He was also born in 1948, so he published a new book, and everybody was delighted. I have just been quoting him. Well, we are just about to close this discussion. So before the last question, we would like to invite you to the event of signing the books in front of this room. We have some time limitations, so we would like to ask you the number of the books you would like to have signed. But you can take unlimited number of pictures with our wonderful guest. But Please do not take different texts, do not organize the background. And the last question is as follows. It's related with the previous question. Do you believe in the crisis of narrative? Do you believe that we have lost the skill of transforming information society into the community of story? Do we still have this community of the story? Yes, of course we have it. And I am 100% sure that this community still exists. So this is our wish. Thank you for this wonderful meeting, Andrzej. Thank you.
Dziękuję Państwu.
Jedzą kanapki z kawiorem.
Nadzwyczajna kasa.
Obrażanie dziennikarzy telewizji polskiej.
Chodzi o działania polityczne.
Przygotowanie ofiar dla pedofilów.
Für Deutschland.
TVP Info. Włącz się na nowo.
Radość, nadzieja, życie, wyzwanie, pasja, pamięć, zaufanie, pokój, jedność. Słowa tworzą świat. Polskie Radio. Źródło wiarygodnych informacji.
Plany biznesowe powstają z marzeń. Dlatego nie ma dwóch takich samych firm. Jedni chcą działać na całym świecie. Innym cały świat mieści się w dłoni. Sukces biznesu to nie tylko jego wielkość, ale też szczęście, jakie przynosi ludziom. PKO Bank Polski.
Uwielbiam szycie w sieci. Wczoraj podszyłem się pod wnuczka, wieczorem uszyłem intrygę na apce randkowej, a dziś planuję grubymi nićmi szyte oszustwo z promocją. Tak się szyje.
Na oszustów są sposoby. Zapoznaj się z poradami ekspertów na niedajsiepodszyć.pl.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it. And how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise.
Polskie Radio.
Jedynka.
Rodzina spółek Pelion to 12 000 osób pracujących w ponad 300 spółkach w Polsce, Szwecji, Wielkiej Brytanii i na Litwie. Jesteśmy liderem w branży ochrony zdrowia. Od 1990 roku dbamy o długość i jakość życia. Pracować z nami możesz w jednym z 7 obszarów.
Dziś Nowy Jork, jutro Londyn. Za chwilę Paryż, Warszawa, Berlin. Na całym świecie kultura pulsuje rytmem. Wystarczy tylko włączyć dwójkę. Dwójka, Polskie Radio. Jesteś na miejscu.